You have to think of sensitive in terms of its word origin. Now, the word sensitive came from the Latin word sensere, to feel.
Mm-hmm.
So the sensitive person feels more.
Yeah.
So the example I often give is, and that can lead to both very positive and very difficult consequences. For example, if I tapped you on the shoulder right now, you wouldn't feel any pain at all. But if you were not wearing a shirt and your skin was exposed, furthermore, if you had a burn on your shoulder, so your nerve endings were close to the surface, if I tapped you with the same force, you'd feel extreme, excruciating pain, even though the external event was no different.
Right.
So sensitivity magnifies the pain that we have. Sensitivity also leads to more creativity. So very often, the most creative people also have the most pain, which is why so many creative people escape from their pain through all kinds of dysfunctions like addictions and so on. So there's a real link between creativity and sensitivity, and creativity and sensitivity and suffering at the same time. The Gifted Child, the German title of which was Prisoners of Childhood, was really all about the fact that stuff happens to us as children, negative things happen, then we adapt to those things by taking on certain defensive ways of being, and then we live the rest of our lives from those defensive modes. So we're not actually experiencing the present, we're constantly reliving the past from a perspective that we acquired when we were helpless and vulnerable children. And when she says the gifted child, she means the sensitive child. So the more sensitive the child is, the more he or she feels the pain and stress of the environment, and the more affected they are, and the more that shapes their lives. And that book came along for me when I was in my 40s, and I was a successful doctor, and I was a father, but I was depressed, I was anxious, I was a driven workaholic. You wouldn't have known that when you saw me on the job. But inside me, I was discouraged. I had difficulties in my marriage. With my children, I felt they were afraid of me, and they were, because of my rages. And that book helped me understand. It was the first book to help me understand where all that came from. So that was, for me, as for many other people, a seminal read. And really, my whole work since then has been to help liberate people from that prison that childhood often imposes on so many of us.
This book has come up repeatedly in my life as a recommendation, as a recommended book from friends who benefited from it, who are very, certainly from any outward perspective, highly functioning, in some cases, world-class performers in their fields. And I'm, in retrospect, sad that I ignored those recommendations, but it was in part because I didn't like the pairing of gifted child. I didn't want to label myself gifted child. We could certainly psychoanalyze that, but I was like, if this is a book written for people who are in, say, gifted and talented programs or have some God-given talent, for whatever reason, I had a resistance to that, so I didn't read it. But The Prisoners of Childhood makes a lot more sense. Well, to me, anyway.
Well, I think it's a more accurate title, but there's two things I would say in response. First of all, why do you resist your own giftedness? You're clearly gifted. So why would you not want to find out about that?
Don't know.
Yeah, so that's something you might want to consider.
Sure.
Number one. Number two, really what she means is the sensitive child.
Yeah, so sensitive, that would draw me in because I've had, we don't have to necessarily go down this rabbit hole right now, but I've had a number of my friends recently ask me, when did you know you were so sensitive?
Yeah.
And not sensitive in a hyper-reactive way, not in a negative way, just in a perceptive way. And I'd never thought of myself, it would never have occurred to me to label myself sensitive. And just in the last year, I've been thinking about that. So the sensitive child would make more sense, or be more appealing to me.
That's the first point I would make. Now, the other thing goes back to what you said about these people that you know who are high performers. Look at that word performers. What does it mean to perform? One meaning of it is to put on a show.
Sure, that's one meaning. Mm-hmm.
And I would have been one of these people who was a high performer. In other words, look at us from the outside, a successful family doctor, director of a palliative care unit at a major hospital, national columnist for Canadian newspaper, writing medical columns, performing at a high level. And inside, again, anxious, frustrated, depressed, discouraged. And in my personal life, a lot of suffering. So a lot of people who perform well are actually deeply troubled inside. And of course, there's many famous examples of that. Some of the greatest performers, like Presley or Marilyn Monroe, and any number of people I could name, that's what they were. They were performers. And even from themselves, they hid their own suffering. So the first question is, why would anybody dissociate? Not that you do it, by the way. You don't dissociate. Your brain does it automatically. I mean, do you decide, Miriam, do you decide all of a sudden, I'm going to dissociate now?
Not at all. That's one of the most frustrating things, is that it just happens so automatically.
Okay, now, no, don't think about yourself. Well, why would any human being, why would any human organism do that?
Yeah, I guess it's just overwhelm. It's a response to just not being able to cope with whatever's in front of you. Exactly. And its origins are always in childhood, when the brain is developing. So that, like for example, my ADHD, my tuning out, which is a milder form of dissociation, was a response to circumstances that as an infant I couldn't handle. So that the brain tunes out as a way of defending itself from the overwhelming stress. And it's doing so when the brain is developing and all the circuits are being laid down. So the tuning out, the dissociation, actually becomes wired in. And later on, it takes very little to trigger it.
So I just wanted to ask, I've come to recognize my deep sensitivity as well as in my family through my healing of trauma and coming into authenticity. So I was curious what you recommend how prevent trauma when deeply sensitive.
Well, you know, it's a bit like asking, how do you prevent trauma when deeply Black in a racist society? Because this society does not honor vulnerability. In fact, it kind of shuns it. You're being weak. How many times have you been told, don't be so sensitive?
Hundreds.
You might as well have been told, now what color is your hair? Are you a brunette or you're blonde? I can't quite tell.
British, well, I died, but I have green eyes.
Okay, well, people might as well tell you, don't be so green-eyed. It's just your nature. No, nobody ever told you not to be green-eyed, but they told you not to be sensitive, which is as much part of your nature as the green eyes are. So in this society, sensitive people are hurt. Now, how do you prevent it? Is if the parents had the wherewithal and the awareness and the teachers to recognize sensitivity and to actually honor it and to cherish it. Because in traditional societies, the sensitive people were the shamans, they were the healers. In our society, don't be so weak. Don't be such a namby-pamby. Don't be so sensitive. So how do you prevent it? You can't as an individual, as a fetus, as an infant, as a small child, you can't. You can heal from the traumas, but you could hardly have prevented it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to ask a question that somebody would rather remain anonymous, but I think it's important. They said that their mother was an alcoholic for years and was ostracized from the family. She's been sober for years, but it's still a taboo subject. She's still ostracized. And it fits in with so much of what you talk about and what you advise, that she wonders, your ideas and thoughts on how to overcome that taboo.
Well, I'd have to know much more about the situation. She may or may not be able to overcome it, because it may be a deeply held prejudice that the family is not willing to give up, precisely because her own journey was so painful for them because it reminded them too much of what they don't really want to know, which is their own dysfunctions. Her addiction, her alcoholism, was not her individual manifestation. She was the canary in the mine, manifesting the dysfunction, the multi-generational, non-culpable dysfunction of the entire family. So the family may or may not be ready to confront that in themselves. Having said that, assuming that the family is some way open, she could actually go to the family without blame, if she's ready to do that, if she can do this authentically and say, you know what, I really get that my behavior was so painful for you all, that you all love me so much. You couldn't handle it. And you couldn't handle the behaviors that I generated as a result of my addiction. And I get it. But I'm hoping we can reconnect, because I miss you all. Now, if she's in a position to say that, that'd be one approach. Whether or not she's received or not does not depend on her.